Hey, Shalom, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to say call hello, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakah, Kudash. Send double honors to the apostles, elders, and bishops of Great Millstone. Send much peace, love, and salutations to Yakim out there pushing the word of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, and sincerity and truth. This is Brother Ariella. On this lesson, I just want to address this whole issue with Maduro in the news, talking about he's deploying 4.5 million militia and 400,000 of his military. And, a lot of the stuff that's going on, it's a lot of propaganda and people just talking, even when it's with these leaders, And as you analyze things and see things from a more practical outlook, you realize that, in order for these prophecies, likely what they call the World War III algorithm, for it to really go down, there's just a lot more moving parts. This is a piece of it because what's really happening, that's happening in Central and South America is Esau stirring up problems that he's been stirring up for over 50, 60 years and hiding his hands. When you want to deal with the drug cartels, when you want to deal with the drug trafficking that's been going on, when you want to talk about the war on drugs, the destabilization of Central and South America, Esau, the so-called white man, has his hands in it. And we all know that Esau likes to keep his nose powdered. He loves to keep his nose powdered. But what he's done and what he's doing is being able to utilize his propaganda machine to vilify you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And that's what he's done with this war on drugs. That's what he's done with Central and South America. While they laud themselves as coming in there and being peacekeepers, they're actually paying for the opposition and getting their pockets laced with the money off the profits, and taking over the industries within the countries. Now, I did some videos years back on Venezuela when Maduro first got in there, and basically showed you brothers and sisters how the Edomites have economically destabilized Venezuela, then vilified them for being poor, then vilified the people for getting themselves involved in the trafficking, routes that they helped create even. And I'm going to show a little bit of that, but I want to read this. Ezekiel 7:26 says, mischief shall come upon mischief, and rumor shall be upon rumor. Then shall they seek a vision of the prophet, but the law shall perish from the priest and the counsel from the ancients. I'm just bringing that out because we're in this time where you got a lot of BS going on. You got a lot of false rumors, a lot of clickbait, and a lot of these pundits that are out here, they tell a report, but they don't tell the full story, So right now, what do you have in the news is Maduro talking about this deploying a militia. I'm going to play this.
In a dangerous escalation, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has announced the deployment of more than 4.5 million militia across the country. Maduro's remarks followed reports suggesting that the United States has deployed guided missile destroyers off Venezuelan waters. The move aligns with the Trump administration's bid to cut down drug trafficking. And the U.S. has also raised the bounty on Maduro's arrest to $50 million from the previously imposed $25 million. Now, onlookers are wondering if this latest standoff is a prelude to something bigger. Our final story explores.
4.5 million militia members, prepared, activated and armed, will be out marching in cities across Venezuela. This is Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's special strategy to counter threats from the United States.
This week, I will activate a special plan to guarantee coverage with more than 4,500,000 militiamen throughout the national territory. Militias prepared, activated, and armed.
Now, the first thing that should come in your head is how are they going to arm 4.5 million people? If they have they're one of the poorest countries in South America, where are they going to get the munitions to fund this? How are they going to pay for the food for these people? Just from the outset, it sounds absolutely retarded and ridiculous, and you should know that it's just talking. Most of these people will not be armed. If they are part of the militia group, it's going to be dysfunctional. It's not going to be very well organized, and it damn sure won't stop the United States military, which has basically created a ransom on Maduro's head, which will likely create splinter groups within Venezuela of opposition groups funding people to say, you know what, how about we capture this dude and get the ransom money? So all Esau doing is stirring things up and creating confusion within Venezuela. Meanwhile, he's vilifying the tribes. It's just basically justifying the crackdown that Esau wants to bring on you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, and they've always used this angle, right? Because most of the drugs that we know that's coming out of South America is not coming from Venezuela. It's coming from Colombia. All right, it might be getting trafficked through Venezuela in some processes, but the reason why they're having to putting warships out there is stupid. That don't even make sense, because they're moving this stuff on boats that's zipping and moving through the waters quickly. So you know, it's all a ploy, because Esau's not going to stop the movement of cocaine, drugs. Esau don't care about that. They too busy using it themselves. They love coke. So-called white man loves cocaine way more than Negroes love crack. Okay? Cocaine is number one. All right? So they're not going to stop these cartels in Mexico, Panama, Venezuela. They're just going to take control of it, so to speak. They're going to take more control of it. So this is how they play these games. But Esau has always been compelled to vilify, so he can justify himself rolling on our people. All right. This is Psalms 137 and 7. It says, "Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, race it, even to the foundation thereof. O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones." Esau's always had a bloodlust for our nation, man. And he'll do anything in his media to vilify you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, man. He'll make it seem like you're the number one drug user, drug dealer. You're the number one in violent crime and theft. The world would just be a happy place if you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans got pushed out of the way. When in fact, the number one purveyor, war, death, destruction, robbery, drug use, all that, the number one provider of all those things, when you figure it out, comes from Esau. So now this is an example right here that we're reading in Psalms 137 of how Edom said, raise it, whenever we were being taken down by the Babylonians, to give them the opportunity to come and get gold and resources out of our coffers. Same thing happened during the time of Purim, when there was the Persians was ruling. Haman and his family and his cohorts were plotting against Mordecai, Esther, and the Israelite families to have the Persians take us out. But what always happens? They end up getting smacked. All right, and even in this time, as they try to vilify us, they're gonna get caught up in that time. Right? Now, going all the way back to the time of the blessing, this hate, this bloodlust for our people has been there. Right? Genesis 27 and 41 says, "And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father at hand, then will I slay my brother Jacob." See? This is in the mind of the Edomite. He in his mind, we gonna get you. We're gonna get you. Okay?
He has also activated the new peace squadrons to guard Caracas and patrol its neighborhoods. These units comprise the police, the military, and community organizations.
The militia is integrated into all peace squadrons. With the plan we are developing to activate the militia throughout the country, from north to south, from east to west, and all defensive capabilities so that no one will ever touch Venezuela.
And really what he's saying, so no one touches me, because he's scared. because it looks like Esau might be moving forward, trying to basically create a coup in Venezuela, take him out, and put in somebody else. Okay, and that's why they're raising the ransom, because they don't have to go in with all these poor militia groups. You said you got 4.5 million militia all around Venezuela. That's basically 4.5 million places to be infiltrated, because this is not well organized. Look at these people. Do they look like actual military members? These look like people who grow crops and shit, who work in the market, who just need some money. Shekels at it. How many bullets you think is in this gun? Probably none. Probably none. So, you brothers, you see this 4.5 million militia. Look, listen, bro. These niggas ain't got no money. All right. So what I want to do is pull this up. I typed in how much ammunition would it take for Venezuela to arm 4.5 million militiamen, and so this is what it said. Good question. Let's break it down. Venezuela has claimed since 2020 that it's built up a Bolivarian militia of about 4.5 million members, but there are a few realities that affect whether those numbers translate into an actual armed and supplied force. 1. Militia versus military. The formal Venezuelan armed forces are established or estimated at 120 to 150,000 active duty personnel, plus around 220,000 reservists. The 4.5 million militia members are not full-time soldiers. They're more like a political reserve force, often poorly trained and mainly intended as a show of mass support for the government. Ammunition and weapon stockpiles. Militia's military stockpiles are limited and heavily dependent on imports. In the past 2 decades, most of its major arms came from Russia and China. Ammunition is costly, and Venezuela's economy has been in severe crisis since about 2014, with hyperinflation and collapsing oil reserves. That makes maintaining large stockpiles extremely difficult. Even the regular army has had shortages of spare parts, fuel, and ammunition reported by defectors and independent observers. Scale and supply needed. Equipped in 4.5 million people with just a basic combat load, say 120 rounds each for an AK pattern rifle, would require 540 million rounds of ammunition. In comparison, that's more than most medium-sized national armies. That's more than most medium-sized national armies keep in war reserve, and Venezuela does not have the industrial base to produce it domestically at that scale. The practical reality is this: most of the militia is not armed on a daily basis. Reports suggest that they often drill unarmed or with wooden rifles, and that only a fraction have access to actual firearms. Venezuela likely maintains ammunition stocks of regular armed forces plus a limited reserve, but nowhere near enough for 4.5 million people. Right? So this is 4.5 million, mostly just regular niggas walking around, saying that they support the government. But how many of the 4.5 million could be potential sellouts? Could it be 2%? Could it be 10%? Could it be 20%? So that's potentially hundreds of thousands of people that are ready to defect, that will take a bribe, that can be switched to the other side for the sake of protecting their family and their personal interests. Okay? That's the reality of what's going on. And this guy really is trying to just protect his own hide. Okay? Venezuela does not have enough ammunition. The bottom line is Venezuela does not have enough ammunition or weapons to fully arm and sustain a 4.5 million person militia. That militia figure is largely symbolic, useful for political messaging and mobilization, but in practical military terms, only a small fraction could actually be equipped for combat. See, yeah. So a lot of this stuff is just a lot of mischief and political bolstering and rumors on rumors and just a lot of talking. But the fact of the matter is that Esau, with their covert operations, their CIA, and ability to go in there and create, small little proxy military coups and armies, or have destabilized Venezuela very badly, especially when you add on economic sanctions and stuff like that, and created basically a powder keg. Which direction it will go, we will have to see, because like I said, Esau, he comes in, he acts like he's just so grandiose and he wants to stop the drug war, but meanwhile he's just taking it over and controlling it more and more and more. Esau's not going to stop putting that nose candy in his face. He loves it, especially Trump. Okay, Job 13:4 says, "But ye are forgers of lies, ye are all physicians of no value." Man, these guys, they can, because they have the access to control media and do this and that, man. They just forge lies, man. Especially about you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, the true Israelites, because he has a bloodlust for you, and Trump has shown himself he's coming for you. That's why he's militarizing ICE and these different factions inside of America. He's running through Washington, D.C. streets, and also they're doing it on the border towns of Texas and in California. Esau's getting ready to roll, man. Now, we've been telling you, all you so-called Negroes out there and Latinos, and y'all think we's free now. Esau don't like you. And them real fangs are getting ready to come out. Now, I'm not going to play this whole thing, but if you go and understand the full story of what's going on down there,
or a sinister,
what's going down in there, and not just in Venezuela, but Colombia, different areas. Where the brothers from? It's a small little country. Suriname. Okay. Then you have we all know the stories of Nicaragua, right? With the Contras and everything like that. The stories of Rick Ross. Okay. Yeah, everybody knows about Escobar out there in Colombia. Well, y'all don't think the American CIA and government had their hands in these different factions that was rising up, falling, taking control of these lands, setting up new puppet governments? You think they just sat there and watched it? No, they helped it. They funded it. Okay, so I'm going to play some of this, but if you want to go listen to the whole thing, you can. All you got to do is type it in. Okay?
conspiracy,
Let me play this.
families were forced into poverty and fatal overdoses skyrocketed. Was this a horrible epidemic that the government failed to contain, or a sinister conspiracy organized by none other than the Central Intelligence Agency, aimed at disenfranchising African American communities and funding bloody government insurrection?
And so they've always used these different things, man. Even during the time of Prohibition, they used that to come against our people.
Today, we're going to find out, in an insane story that involves 2 U.S. presidents, a South American coup, journalists getting their lives and livelihoods destroyed, and an unimaginable pile of untraceable dark money. First, let's go back to June 1971, when President Richard Nixon started all this by formally declaring a war on drugs. According to Nixon, the use and abuse of narcotics was the public's #1 enemy, after the free-loving 60s normalized drug use in the states to an unprecedented degree. The war on drugs involved imposing stricter measures against drug-related crimes, such as mandatory minimum prison sentencing for even minor offenses. This was the first domino in a series that would have horrific consequences even today. As of the end of 2023, around 1.8 million Americans had been incarcerated within the U.S. 1 in 5 of the incarcerated population in the United States has been imprisoned for a drug-related offense, and this includes minor offenses, like possession or even suspected possession. John Ehrlichman, Nixon's domestic policy chief, gave an interview in 1994 that expanded on the ulterior motives behind the war on drugs campaign.
most of which revolved around Nixon wanting to keep the presidency. The main opposition to this, as Ehrlichman put it, were two demographics that were bound to not vote for old Tricky Dick, those being the left wing, who were vehemently opposed to the ongoing Vietnam War, and black people who Nixon's Republican coalition had turned into a scapegoat. So why did Nixon have it out for black Americans? In the wake of the civil rights movement, the more radical black power movement started gaining momentum and was met with backlash from Republicans and white supremacists. Nixon used racial inequality as a wedge issue without actually addressing.
Now, we know they talk about Hoover, CIA, and the creation of a lot of these groups, and the FBI, and the utilization of these different government entities and institutions to basically co-opt a lot of black movements and everything like that. So this is no surprise, man. They do this stuff.
Addressing the systemic problems causing racial inequality in America. The war on drugs was a perfect cover to kneecap the movements that Nixon saw as a threat to his political power. As John Ehrlichman put it, we knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and black people with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Back in the mid-70s, the war on drugs took a bit of a hiatus, and between 1973 and 1977, some states even decriminalized the possession of marijuana. In 1977, Jimmy Carter became president by running on a campaign of decriminalizing marijuana, and the Senate Judiciary Committee did vote to decriminalize possession of up to a single ounce of marijuana. It wasn't much, and it certainly didn't undo the damage done by the war on drugs, but it was a start. But if you're wondering how any of this leads us to the CIA and crack smuggling, then you haven't been paying attention. All this context lays the groundwork for what would happen when the war on drugs saw a resurgence in the 80s, and black Americans once again bore the brunt. Under the administration of Ronald Reagan, many of Nixon's earlier war on drugs policies were expanded upon and reinforced. Reagan was committed to passing more severe penalties for drug-related crimes in both congressional and state legislatures. This caused a massive boom in the number of incarcerations that occurred for those committing nonviolent drug crimes. Similarly to how things went under Nixon, mandatory minimum prison sentences for certain drug offenses were established in 1986, when Congress passed the Anti-Drug Abuse Act. Many would later levy criticism against this law for having racist ramifications, as it mandated longer prison sentences for offenses that involved crack cocaine than it did for those that involved powdered cocaine. Why? Well, because thanks to someone, more on the CIA in a moment, crack cocaine was more prevalent in predominantly black American areas, while powder cocaine was more widely used among white Americans. A 5-year prison sentence was automatically given to anyone found with 5 grams of crack, while you need 500 grams of powder cocaine to land the same sentence. But you're probably wondering...
Boom, and Esau always have used tactics like this to get Jake hemmed up, you know what I'm saying? And that's just the nature of his mindset, keep you locked up. Take your leaders and lock them up and throw away the key. Right? Isaiah 14:17, that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the houses of his prisoners. This is that place, man. All right? And our people are perpetually being caught in this snare and wondering, oh man, how is this happening? How is this happening? Well, we know. Because Satan is ruling. That's why this whole movement of them sending Navy destroyers, all that, there's just accusers of our brethren, man. Pretending like they're cracking down on drug cartels. They're not cracking down on no damn drug cartels, man. Most of the stuff don't even come from Venezuela. It comes out of Colombia. Right? Psalms 140 and 1, it says, "Deliver me, O Lord, from the evil man. Preserve me from the violent man, which imagine mischiefs in their heart. Continually are they gathered together for war. They have sharpened their tongues like a serpent. Adder's poison is under their lips. Selah." All right? So it's just all a setup to demonize our people, like I said, to demonize you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, to make it seem like you're the problem in the world that the white man needs to come and clean up. Meanwhile, they're the ones that are pushing these industries. They're the ones that are supplying the weapons all around the world. They're the ones that are actually allowing for stuff to be moved and processed. You think that all of that cocaine can get over to the United States without the aid of federal workers? Without the aid of major institutions? Without the aid of government officials? Y'all niggas have watched Ozark, Breaking Bad. You seen it. You know? Them stories ain't just BS. Scarface. You know?
Just where did all that crack cocaine come from? How did it end up in the streets in the first place? Well, those are exactly the kind of questions that will have the nearest CIA agent shuffling awkwardly in their chair. To uncover the connection between the CIA and the crack that flooded U.S. cities in the 80s, we need to look away from the streets of LA or Miami and instead just head on over to the jungles of Central America. Just a year before the 1980 election that saw Ronald Reagan assume power, the dictatorial government of Nicaragua was overthrown. Huh? What does that have to do with the situation in America in the 80s? Well, as it turns out, everything. As the U.S. International Intelligence Agency, the CIA has a long and unnerving history when it comes to meddling in the affairs of other countries, especially when it starts to look like other nations might be tilting toward a left-wing or, heaven forbid, a socialist government. Then the Central Intelligence Agency swoops in to pull some strings in the shadows to get this country's leaders assassinated or overthrown. Of course, American clandestine intelligence experts can't be seen meddling like this, otherwise it would spark an international incident and possibly a war. So what the CIA prefers to do is bolster anyone in their target country who already opposes the new way of doing things. These are usually extreme right-wing paramilitary groups who suddenly receive a surprising amount of funding and even weaponry courtesy of the boys over at Langley. Here's a not-so-fun fact. That's exactly how Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan ultimately formed the Taliban.
Now, I was just going to mention that, actually. That's how they formed the Taliban. And now these same members have taken over Syria. All right? And watch, rinse, repeat, man.
With a little help from the CIA, who wanted the country's communist government overthrown. This practice was particularly commonplace during the Cold War, as almost every communist government became allied with the USSR. So, the USA sought to undermine those allies by backing extremist groups and rebels to destabilize the countries. And in a tale as old as time, that's exactly what went down in Nicaragua. After the Sandinista National Liberation Front, a political party of socialist revolutionaries, overthrew the Nicaraguan dictator Anastasio Somoza, they were able to seize control as part of the Junta of National Reconstruction. This was a provisional government that aimed to restore the country post-revolution. Eventually, the Sandinistas forced the more centrist members of the junta out, taking exclusive control in March 1981. This was all largely considered perfectly fine by the US, until it became apparent that the new regime in Nicaragua saw itself as a satellite of Cuba, which had close ties to the Soviet Union. Shortly after, the Contras formed, a group of far-right paramilitary oppositional rebels, and received backing and support from, well, you guessed it, the Central Intelligence Agency. When Reagan became president following the 1980 election, he began quietly sending aid to the Contras through the CIA to assist them in fighting against the Sandinista government. As part of their Cold War efforts against the Soviet Union, money and weapons were provided to the Contras by the CIA, enabling them to conduct a brutal paramilitary campaign against the Sandinista government. Almost just as sickening was that Ronald Reagan himself described these right-wing extremists as freedom fighters and claimed that cutting off support to the Contras would allow the USSR to influence Central America. This CIA backing of the Contras didn't continue unencumbered, though, as in 1982, Democrats within Congress passed laws that did eventually prevent the support of the rebels in Nicaragua. But of course, this didn't stop the CIA from backing the Contras. It just meant that they were forced to get creative, to really think outside the box for new ways to channel funding to the extremist paramilitary group. And what's a good way to make a lot of money? Cocaine. Now, coke wasn't new to the US at the time, and we aren't talking about the soda. Since the late 70s, there have been record numbers of people snorting cocaine in the United States. Then, when the 80s were in full swing, the latest designer drug hit the market. A smokable variation of cocaine, crack. You might have heard those two terms used interchangeably, but there is actually a difference, the more you know. Most of the cocaine entering the United States was illegally imported from Colombia, but the rise in the use of crack cocaine across American cities became a seemingly instant,
and it still is mostly from Colombia.
Infinite money hack for organized crime groups, even those backed by the CIA. You see, as with other countries where the US had covertly assisted in overthrowing newly established governments like Laos, Afghanistan, and Burma, Nicaragua also had a pre-existing trade in narcotics. This had caught the CIA's attention long before their effort to assist the Contras. So it didn't take long for the order to come through from the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Let's smuggle some drugs to get some cash for our operations in Nicaragua. Okay, well, that's pretty uncharitable against the CIA. In 1981, one of the paramilitary groups working alongside the CIA's officers to overthrow the Sandinista government were members of the Nicaraguan Revolutionary Democratic Alliance. A message that was sent to the CIA headquarters stated that the leadership of this group had decided to engage in drug smuggling to the United States in order to finance its anti-Sandinista operations. The same message also declared that an initial trial run had taken place during July of 1981, wherein drugs were transported from Nicaragua to Miami, Florida,
Port of Miami,
and smuggled aboard a plane. Now, despite the alleged drug trafficking taking place during the Contra War, the Central Intelligence Agency never bothered to verify whether or not any of it was true. As for their involvement, it's never been outright confirmed nor denied. But just taking a look at some of the particulars, the waters get a little murky. For one, the Nicaraguan Revolutionary Democratic Alliance was disbanded in 1982, with some of its former members instead joining up with the Nicaraguan Democratic Force, which also worked with the CIA. CIA agents directly received allegations that 5 now ex-members of the Nicaraguan Revolutionary Democratic Alliance had been involved with drug trafficking while fighting against the Sandinista government on the border between Nicaragua and Costa Rica. These 5 were supposedly working alongside a man named Jorge Morales, who was a known drug trafficker. Here is the interesting part, though. While the CIA officially broke its ties with the Nicaraguan Revolutionary Democratic Alliance in 1984, it still continued to maintain contact with 4 out of the 5 members who were allegedly associates of Morales until as late as 1987. Coincidence? Maybe. These Nicaraguan Revolutionary Democratic Alliance members had previously worked alongside.
Now, when you study it, it goes, basically everything goes haywire. You have splits of the governments and so on and so forth. But when you look into this, these, the drug trafficking, I just kind of typed in what is some of the drug trafficking that's verified and unverified. And as you can see, this is verified routes from Colombia. As you can see, they have maritime routes that cut up and go through Central America, through Mexico, and then end up into the United States. The Caribbean joints that go through the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, all this from some Colombian spots, and then you have the same stuff happening in Venezuela, Colombia. They all work together. But the whole point of it is that Esau is basically going to come out of this thing trying to act like they're doing better for people when actually it's really just them trying to come down on the tribes. And they're behind and funding this person. They're funding that person. They're making sure that this goes. And that's what this video goes into. Which, if you brothers and sisters want to know more, just type that into the infographic show. It's a pretty detailed. They get even more detailed and show how diabolical Esau is as you keep watching. Now, this is Psalms 55:21. It says, "The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords." You see? And so right now, we're just in a time for Esau trying to basically vilify our people in every facet that they can. They want to take over these different governments. They want to take over the oil in Venezuela. for energy purposes. All right, that's why they're keen in on Venezuela, and they're not keening in on Colombia. All right, because they already have pretty much Colombia locked down from whenever they took down the former cartels that was rolling in the 80s and 90s. You know, Pablo Escobar and all them dudes. All right, and those families, and you know they was all tied in with the government and everything like that. So Esau's just making their moves so that they can try to secure this next economy, and they just do little covert things like that. So when I look at Maduro, I hear him what he's saying. I'm like, man, stop the cap. You know, Maduro really he has no leverage. He's cooked. All right, and he's trying to use that militia to protect himself, and I don't think it's going to work. But we're going to see, man. It's all in the hands of Yahweh Shem Yahushua. But I just wanted to bring a little edification on that, man. And everything Esau says, there's 15 other things that's actually going on in the background, you know. So if brothers want to add on to that, please add on to it, man, whether you say it in the comment board or whether you do a video, man. With that being said, I want to say, call hello, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Rakah, Kodash, double honor to the apostles, elders, and bishops of Great Millstone. Much peace, love, and salutations to you, Akim, out there pushing the word of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, sincerity and truth. Shalom.